Chainsaw Man is considered a modern visual pioneer for manga, conjuring up unforgettable images that sometimes flex their creativity for fun by having single illustrations bridge multiple panels seamlessly. There was a heavy expectation coming into the anime, but I think it manages to rise to the occasion and stand shoulder to shoulder technically with the prowess of the manga, thanks to the rich pool of talent they drew from. The near seamless combination of hand-drawn 2D and 3D animation complement one another to creatively express the scale and momentum in the action and character design. The sound design, music, and art direction often crackle with the polish of brilliant artists. But the completed story as a manga is 97 chapters long, and this first season will only be 12 episodes. To be clear, I haven't read the manga. All I have seen is the first 4 episodes of the anime that have been released so far. If I didn't have so many friends proclaiming the glory of the manga, if I didn't recognize the nearly worldwide acclaim of the story, at this point I would be unsure whether or not the story would end up being meaningful and satisfying to me despite the towering technical prowess. But because I have this external wall of support for the story, I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt and instead place my worries here. While I do not have the unrealistic expectation that this first season needs to wrap up the entire story, I do require this first season to be a satisfying and partially conclusive journey by itself that can feed into the greater whole of the universe. Having seen a third of the show, I'm worried that the pacing may not be up to the task to deliver full character arcs and story threads that leave me happy. There are many examples of long stories divided up into sections, but each section must serve as a self-contained experience, and that is my expectation for Chainsaw Man. I think that this anime has an uphill battle to fight in the story department for me, so let's discuss why. The first episode is the strongest of them all so far, which is namely what gives me hope in the progression of the show. There's a pretty interesting character arc we see in this episode through some cycles our protagonist, Denji, is going through. As the show begins, he finds himself drowning in a sea of debts left to him by his late father. He works for the Yakuza under an understanding that he'll be killed if he stops fulfilling their demon hunting contracts. Pochita is the name of a little chainsaw dog who is his companion. In a backstory reveal, we see that these two are indebted to each other because Denji allowed Pochita some of his blood to survive a fatal wound, but in return, Pochita pledged his services to Denji as a weapon in his demon hunting crusades. This through line of being indebted to someone is the biggest theme of the show in this first episode. At the end of the first episode, Denji actually combines bodies with Pochita and slaughters all those who held him as a slave, but then he immediately signs a lifelong contract as a demon hunter under an organization who promises to provide comfort and food for him. In this first episode, we go full circle from breaking free of slavery to signing away one's life all over again. This theme of debts is one of the 2 biggest story themes so far. The other is dreams. Every character, no matter how significant, has some dream that they are trying to fulfill, and Denji is painted as a degenerate who aspires to dream as lowly as just wanting to squeeze a boob. My concerns with Chainsaw Man start entering the picture when we realize just how much the show is going to hold your hand through the establishment of these themes. In episodes 2 through 4 especially, there is near constant repeated exposition that drives home the themes to the point of being unmissable, and in result, it feels like the writers don't completely trust your intelligence. These seeds must be planted at the beginning of a story, so they are technically doing that correctly, but the degree to which they are emphasized feels more annoying than essential to me as of now. In the first act of your story, you must ground your audience emotionally with the characters through the internal and external conflict, which will later bloom into a philosophical conflict. Each of these characters has a moment where they reveal their dream and the motivation behind it, which, in writing, is what we call a ghost, someone's backstory that justifies their beliefs. I wish that these ghosts were thought out differently to be more subtle, or at least introduced at times that feel appropriate for the characters to be revealing that information. Each character, whether a main character, a side character, or even a one-off villain for the episode, has a mandatory ghost reveal, which makes it a little hard for me to get invested into the characters. This really just comes down to one of the most basic writing philosophies you could learn: show, don't tell. Instead of planting the characters in situations that force their beliefs out of them, they show up and express all of their inner desires and dreams to the audience. This is the equivalent of getting a freeze frame on a character with a list of facts about them, and that is simply not a way to get me invested into these characters. Now, I'm fully aware that this central problem with the show for me is an animeism. These exposition delivery tropes are universal to almost every anime, and because of that, it's traditionally very hard for me to get into the genre. For that, if you want to make the argument that this simply isn't for me, then I completely understand, but my channel is based around the art of writing powerful stories, and I believe that this is a tendency that directly contradicts good writing, so I will consistently point it out every time I see it, even if redundant since it's present in almost every anime. I do the same with modern action films that consistently lack the core ingredients of well-rounded conflict, or comedies that forget to do anything right. Just because it's a common mistake for a genre does not make it excusable to me. At the end of these 4 episodes, we come to a place where 3 of our main characters are forced to live in an apartment together. This is effectively to put Denji on a leash, as his boss puts it. I really like that metaphor for not only how it ties in with the themes of being a slave to others, but also Denji literally is part dog now, to further emphasize this point. I'm a really big fan of abstract imagery which expresses a thematic point, and I think this idea of him being a literal dog being walked down the path of life by this company is the part of Chainsaw Man that tickles my brain the most so far. We have 8 more episodes, so there's plenty of time for them to bring around a character arc for Denji based on the themes of debts and dreams. I've just seen the progression slam on the brakes for mandatory exposition dumps, so I'm not convinced they will spin those 8 episodes well. And even if they do pull off a solid character arc in this first season, I really hope I connect to it because despite my best efforts, it's somewhat of a challenge for me to care so far because of how they deliver the story. It's definitely not too far gone to get me into it, but they're fighting an uphill battle for me at this point. I can certainly see a reality where this anime becomes a worthwhile and substantive journey though in the long run if they stick the landing. To see if they stick the landing, I'll return to give my full thoughts on the first season when it finishes airing December 27th. Stay tuned for my next episode releasing Tuesday at 2 p.m. where I'll be discussing The Banshees of Inisherin. Thanks for watching this episode guys. If you enjoyed it or found it informative, leave it a like and subscribe. If you thought it could have been better though, give it a thumbs down and leave me some constructive criticisms in the comments below. Thanks guys, I'll see you later.